Tonight, we gather at the threshold of an ancient mystery, one that has haunted the corridors of human consciousness since the first soul dared to love and the first heart learned to hunger for what it could never possess. I come before you not as one who offers easy comfort, but as a cartographer of the unseen, a translator of the symbolic language that governs the deepest chambers of the human psyche. What I must reveal to you is both beautiful and terrible, that among all the bonds that tie soul to soul, none is more perilous, none more magnetically irresistible than the invisible chain that binds the empath to the narcissist. This is not the language of pathology, though the world would have you believe it so. This is the language of myth, of archetype, of forces older than memory that move through us like underground rivers, shaping the landscape of every relationship we dare to enter. To understand this bond, we must abandon the safety of clinical distance and descend into the imaginal realm, where symbols speak louder than facts, where dreams carry more truth than daylight, where the wounded and the wounded find each other across the vastness of human longing with the precision of magnets. Picture, if you will, two ancient temples standing in an eternal desert. One temple is made of crystal, transparent, reflecting every ray of light that touches its surface, capturing and holding the prayers, the pain, the very breath of every pilgrim who approaches. This is the temple of the empath, built not of stone but of pure receptivity, of boundaries dissolved in service to some unnamed hunger for connection, for meaning, for the sweet agony of feeling everything. The second temple rises like a fortress of black marble, its walls polished to mirror perfection, reflecting only its own magnificence back to the world. No light enters here, no prayer penetrates its surface. This is the temple of the narcissist, erected stone by stone to protect a void so terrifying, so absolute, that the very architecture must scream of grandeur to drown out the silence within. When these two temples cast their shadows across the desert of human encounter, something inevitable occurs. The crystal temple, in its endless transparency, becomes a perfect mirror for the marble fortress. The fortress, seeing itself reflected with such crystalline clarity, believes it has finally found its matching splendor. Thus begins what I have come to understand as the most dangerous of all human bonds. Not dangerous because it is violent, though violence may come. Not dangerous because it is brief, though brevity may be its only mercy, but dangerous because it is a mutual dance of self-destruction, disguised as love. A conspiracy of the unconscious to keep both souls forever exiled from themselves. The empath, you see, is not born, but forged in the crucible of early wounding. They are the children who learned that survival meant becoming invisible, that love was earned through the exquisite art of anticipating need, of absorbing the emotional weather of others until their own inner climate became as foreign to them as a language they had never learned to speak. Jung understood this as a form of what he called premature individuation, the child forced to become wise before they had learned to be innocent, to develop the capacity for emotional archaeology, while their own treasures remained buried beneath layers of adaptive numbness. The narcissist travels a different path to the same destination of exile. Where the empath dissolved their boundaries in service to others, the narcissist fortified theirs into an impenetrable citadel. Where the empath became hypersensitive to every vibration in the emotional field, the narcissist became hypersensitive only to threats against their carefully constructed image. Both learned in their own way that the self was too dangerous to inhabit fully, too vulnerable to expose, too needy to acknowledge without shame. Jung saw in this dynamic the eternal dance of anima and animus, the contrasexual aspects of the psyche projected outward onto flesh and bone. The empath carries the wounded feminine principle, receptive, nurturing, self-sacrificing, while unconsciously seeking the masculine principle of strength, direction, purpose. The narcissist embodies the wounded masculine, dominative, controlling, self-aggrandizing, while secretly hungering for the feminine principle of unconditional acceptance, endless patience, nurturing love. But here lies the trap that makes this bond so treacherous. Each sees in the other not a whole person, but a missing piece of themselves. The empath believes that if they can just love deeply enough, give completely enough, they can awaken the sleeping heart of the narcissist, and in doing so, finally prove their own worth, their own right to exist. The narcissist believes that if they can just possess the empath's devotion completely enough, control their reflection thoroughly enough, they can finally silence the howling emptiness that threatens to consume them from within. This is what Jung called participation mystique, the unconscious identification with another so complete that the boundaries of self become irrelevant. But unlike the sacred participation mystique of lovers who remain whole while merging, this is a participation mystique of the wounded, each using the other as a drug against the pain of their own incompleteness. I have witnessed this bond in the dreams of countless souls, and the symbols that emerge speak a language older than words. The empath dreams of being a well that never runs dry, of pouring water into vessels that grow larger with each offering, of standing in gardens that bloom only when fed by their own blood. These are not metaphors. They are precise maps of the psychic reality in which the empath has learned to exist. The narcissist dreams of mirrors that crack when approached, of rooms filled with faces that disappear when looked upon directly, of standing on stages where the applause turns to silence the moment they stop performing. These dreams reveal the terror that drives their endless hunger for reflection, validation, proof of existence. When these two wounded archetypes meet, what occurs is not love but possession. Not by demons or spirits, but by complexes, by autonomous aspects of the psyche that take control of consciousness and drive behavior in service of their own unconscious agenda. The empath becomes possessed by what Jung called the savior complex, the mythic compulsion to heal, to redeem, to transform the other through the sheer force of their love. The narcissist becomes possessed by what Jung termed the inflation complex, the archetypal hunger to be seen as divine, perfect, beyond the reach of ordinary human limitation or need. Both are living not their own lives, but the lives of the archetypes that have claimed them. This is why rational advice fails so completely with such bonds. You cannot reason with an archetype any more than you can negotiate with a hurricane. The forces at work operate from layers of the psyche far deeper than the conscious mind can reach. The empath will tell you they know the relationship is destroying them, and they will mean it with every fiber of their conscious being. Yet they will return again and again, pulled by threads invisible to the waking mind, but strong as the gravitational force that holds planets in their orbits. Jung understood that such bonds serve a hidden purpose in the economy of the soul. They are not punishments or accidents, but initiations, harsh teachers that force both parties toward the confrontation with their own shadow, their own unlived life, their own desperate need for wholeness. The danger lies not in the confrontation itself, but in the possibility that both souls will remain forever trapped in the preliminary stages of the initiation, circling endlessly around the pain without ever descending deep enough to find the treasure that waits at the center of the labyrinth. For the empath, the initiation demands the death of the false self that gained its identity through serving others, through being needed, through the endless sacrifice of personal truth on the altar of harmony. They must learn to withdraw their projections, to stop seeing themselves as the solution to others' problems, to discover whether there exists beneath all the giving a self worth knowing, worth protecting, worth loving. This withdrawal of projection is experienced as a kind of death because the empath's entire sense of worth was built on their ability to heal, to help, to transform the lives of others. When they stop giving, when they finally say no, when they choose their own well-being over another's need, they must face the terror that has driven them all along, the possibility that without their usefulness, they have no value, that without their sacrifice, they have no claim on love. For the narcissist, the initiation is equally brutal. They must face the collapse of their carefully constructed false self, must endure the shattering of every mirror that has reflected their grandiosity, must stand naked before the void they have spent their lifetime avoiding. This is not merely humbling, it is a form of psychological annihilation, the death of every strategy they have used to survive since the first moment they learned that their authentic self was not enough to guarantee love, safety, or even basic acknowledgement. Jung called this process the dark night of the soul, but he understood it as a necessary passage, not a punishment. Like the alchemical process of nigredo, the blackening, it represents the death of all that is false, corrupt, or unconscious, so that what is true, authentic, and conscious might finally be born. The bond between empath and narcissist is dangerous precisely because it can serve as either the gateway to this transformation or the prison that prevents it from ever occurring. When both souls remain unconscious of the archetypal forces possessing them, the relationship becomes a feedback loop of mutual destruction. The empath giving more and more while receiving less and less, the narcissist taking more and more while feeling emptier and emptier. But when consciousness begins to penetrate the possession, when either soul begins to see the pattern for what it is, the bond can become what Jung called a temenos, a sacred container in which the work of transformation can occur. This requires immense courage from both parties, the willingness to face not only their own shadow, but the shadow they have been unconsciously enabling in the other. I have seen empaths who, in the crucible of such relationships, finally discover their own rage, their own capacity for boundaries, their own right to exist without constantly justifying that existence through service to others. The very intensity of their pain becomes the force that drives them towards self-reclamation. I have witnessed narcissists who, stripped of their empathic supply, are forced to confront the emptiness within and discover, to their amazement, that the void is not the end of them but the beginning, the fertile darkness from which a genuine self might finally emerge. Yet such transformation is rare, for it requires what Jung called holding the tension of the opposites, the ability to endure the excruciating discomfort of being neither the person you were nor the person you might become, suspended in the liminal space where all old certainties have died, but new ones have not yet been born. Most souls, faced with this tension, will flee back to the familiar, preferring the known suffering of their archetypal possession to the unknown territory of authentic selfhood. The empath will find another narcissist to serve, or perhaps become unconsciously narcissistic themselves, swinging to the opposite pole rather than finding the center. The narcissist will seek new sources of narcissistic supply, or collapse into the victim role, inviting others to save them rather than doing the hard work of saving themselves. This is why Jung insisted that such bonds, while dangerous, are also sacred. They represent the psyche's desperate attempt to achieve wholeness through relationship, to find in the other what has been lost or denied in the self. The tragedy is not that such attempts are made, but that they so often end in mutual destruction rather than mutual transformation. To work with such bonds consciously requires a shift from the personal to the archetypal level of understanding. The empath must learn to see their compulsive giving not as love but as possession by the great mother archetype in her devouring aspect. The mother who consumes her children through endless sacrifice, who makes them guilty for any attempt at independence or authentic selfhood. The narcissist must recognize their hunger for admiration, not as natural confidence, but as possession by the puer aeternus, the eternal child who refuses to grow up, who demands that the world continue to reflect their specialness, while they remain forever exempt from the ordinary demands of human relationship. When these archetypal possessions are recognized and named, both souls gain the possibility of choice. They can continue to serve the archetype unconsciously, or they can begin the slow, difficult work of relationship with these inner figures, learning to honor their gifts while refusing to be enslaved by their demands. This inner work is what Jung called individuation, the process by which the ego learns to relate consciously to the various archetypal forces within the psyche rather than being possessed by them unconsciously. It is perhaps the most difficult work a human being can undertake, for it requires the death of every comfortable illusion about who we are and why we do what we do. For the empath, individuation means learning to love without losing themselves in the beloved, to give without depleting their own essence, to feel deeply without being overwhelmed by the feeling. It means developing what Jung called conscious empathy, the ability to choose when to open and when to close, when to merge and when to separate, when to serve and when to receive. For the narcissist, individuation means the gradual deflation of the grandiose self and the patient construction of something far more valuable, a real self capable of genuine relationship, authentic emotion, and the terrible, wonderful vulnerability of being simply human. This process cannot be rushed, cannot be forced, cannot be achieved through willpower alone. It requires what Jung called a religious attitude, not necessarily belief in a deity, but a profound reverence for the mystery of the psyche, a willingness to be taught by forces larger than the ego, a humility before the vast intelligence that governs the process of psychological transformation. I have found that dreams are often the first messengers of this transformation. The empath begins to dream not of giving endlessly, but of receiving, not of healing others, but of tending their own wounds, not of disappearing into relationships, but of emerging from them with greater clarity about who they truly are. The narcissist begins to dream of breaking mirrors, of removing masks, of standing in empty rooms without applause and discovering they do not disappear, that something real remains when all the performance ends. These dreams are invitations from the unconscious, gentle suggestions that another way of being might be possible. But they require a response, a conscious choice to turn towards the transformation they herald rather than away from the discomfort they promise. In my decades of working with souls caught in such bonds, I have learned that the greatest danger is not the intensity of the connection, but the unconsciousness that surrounds it. When we remain unaware of the archetypal forces at work, we become their helpless victims. When we begin to see the pattern, to name the possession, to understand the symbolic meaning of our suffering, we gain the possibility of transforming curse into blessing, wound into wisdom, dangerous bond into conscious relationship. This transformation is not a destination but a way of traveling, not a solution but a new quality of engagement with the mystery of human connection. It requires what Jung called active imagination, the ability to dialogue consciously with the unconscious forces that shape our lives, to become participants rather than victims in our own psychological drama. For some, this dialogue will lead to the healing of the bond itself, the transformation of a dangerous connection into something genuinely nourishing for both souls. For others, it will lead to the conscious ending of the relationship, not in bitterness or blame, but in recognition that some connections serve their purpose by teaching us what we need to learn, and then releasing us to apply that learning in healthier soil. Both outcomes are valid, both are sacred, both represent victories of consciousness over unconsciousness, of choice over compulsion, of authentic selfhood over archetypal possession. What matters is not the form the resolution takes, but the quality of consciousness brought to it, the willingness to learn rather than merely endure, to grow rather than merely survive, to transform rather than merely repeat. As I near the end of what I can share with you tonight, I am aware that some of you may feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I have described. The work of conscious relationship with our own depths can seem impossibly difficult, especially when we are already struggling with the pain of a dangerous bond. Yet I would remind you that you are not undertaking this work alone. The very archetypes that can possess us destructively also contain within them the seeds of healing. The wounded healer lives within every empath, waiting to transform compulsive giving into conscious service. The wise king or queen lives within every narcissist, waiting to transform grandiose demand into generous leadership. These positive aspects of the archetypes cannot be accessed through force or wishful thinking, but they naturally emerge as consciousness grows, as the ego learns to serve something larger than its own wounds, as the soul remembers its true nature beneath all the accumulated layers of protective strategies. The journey from dangerous bond to conscious relationship is perhaps the most heroic undertaking available to human beings. It requires everything we have: courage, humility, patience, and above all, a willingness to be changed by what we discover about ourselves. Yet this is also the journey that leads to what Jung called the marriage of opposites, not just in outer relationship, but within the psyche itself, where the wounded masculine and feminine principles can finally unite in service of wholeness rather than division. When this inner marriage occurs, when the empath reclaims their own strength and the narcissist rediscovers their own capacity for genuine love, the dangerous bond transforms into something unprecedented. A relationship between two whole human beings who choose each other not from neediness, but from fullness, not from compulsion, but from conscious recognition of shared purpose. Such relationships are rare in our world, not because they are impossible, but because they require what so few are willing to give: the sacrifice of every comfortable lie we tell ourselves about who we are and why we suffer. Yet every time such a transformation occurs, every time two souls choose consciousness over unconsciousness, wholeness over fragmentation, truth over comfortable illusion, they contribute to what Jung called the healing of the world. For the patterns that play out between individuals are the same patterns that shape families, communities, entire cultures. When we heal the dangerous bond within ourselves, we are also healing it in the collective unconscious of humanity itself. This is perhaps the greatest incentive for undertaking such difficult inner work. Not just our own liberation, but the liberation of all those who will come after us, who will inherit a world slightly more conscious, slightly more capable of love than the one we inherited. And so I leave you tonight not with answers, but with an invitation to see your own struggles with dangerous bonds not as personal failures, but as participation in the eternal human endeavor to transform suffering into wisdom, unconsciousness into awareness, dangerous connection into conscious love. The work is difficult, the path is long, and there are no guarantees of success. But there is something infinitely more valuable than success. There is the possibility of becoming who you truly are, beneath all the wounded strategies and protective masks, beneath all the archetypal possessions and unconscious patterns. This authentic self that waits to be discovered is not perfect, not invulnerable, not free from all suffering. But it is real, it is yours, and it is capable of love that heals rather than wounds, of strength that protects rather than dominates, of relationship that serves the highest good of both souls involved. Trust the process, even when it seems to be destroying you. Honor the dangerous bond, even as you learn to transform it. And remember always that in the depths of your greatest suffering lies hidden your greatest gift to the world, the wisdom that can only be earned through conscious engagement with the mystery of human connection in all its terrible, beautiful complexity. The dangerous bond calls you not to destruction, but to transformation. Answer that call with all the courage you can muster, and discover for yourself the gold that lies hidden in the darkness. Please comment connection if you are an empath who has had a fatal bond with a narcissist. Like, subscribe, and share this with anyone who needs to hear this.